What's up, ladies and gentlemen? This is David Benjamin from Rockstar Reviews. Today I'm going to be reviewing the difference between Vivo Barefoot and Xero shoes. And the reason that this review is so important is because I have used Barefoot minimalist shoes for probably a decade now, maybe 12 years. I was very early with the first Vibrams, and I've been utilizing Barefoot minimalist shoes for a long time, and I've utilized multiple different brands. And I will say that Xero shoes and Vivo Barefoot are probably my two favorite brands overall, but there are some things you need to know about these brands individually. So first and foremost, I was a huge sneakerhead as a kid. I played basketball. I would get Jordans, Nikes, and any other brand that was hot and trendy. And I was very familiar with having multiple pairs of shoes for the same purpose, essentially, whether it's athletics or walking or whatever it may be. And I recognized that the quality of the shoes was one thing, the design was another. So you got form, function, or function, form. And then obviously you have the price that plays a role in that as well. So my first job after high school was at a shoe store. I sold shoes, and it was actually a shoe warehouse. So it had multiple brands from I think 10 or 15 different shoe companies. So I got very familiar with different shoe brands and understanding sort of the ergonomics of the shoes, the design, the form, the function, how it felt on the foot, how it felt walking, if it was more aesthetically pleasing or more for design or more for, functional use, so on and so forth. So I had a lot of experience with this. And then my first two jobs out of high school, I was walking for miles a day. So I was a meter reader, and then I did door-to-door sales. So I was on my feet for quite literally miles and miles every single day. And that taught me a lot about footwear, between having the first job at the shoe store, just being into shoes in general, and then walking for 3, 4, 5 miles a day sometimes for the first 2 years of my adult life. I have a lot of steps in. And what I learned from that time was that it's very important to get Barefoot minimalist shoes, because Barefoot minimalist shoes improve your posture and make life easier. Because what happens is it helps to balance your hips. It creates hip alignment, and it makes you stand back further as opposed to sort of standing forward, which is what shoes that from these big brands like Nike and Adidas do. They cause you to lean forward because they tilt forward. The shoes actually do. So going back to Vivo and Xero, I've had multiple Barefoot minimalist brands beyond Xero and Vivo Barefoot. And I've experienced a lot of different brands, so I want to share from that experience, but then also share with you why I like Vivo and Xero the most, and then break down which brand I like the most. I've had multiple pairs from Vivo Barefoot. I've had a few of their boots and one of their walking shoes, and I've had multiple brands from Xero. I've had a few of their boots, a few walking shoes, and then one or two pairs of sandals now as well. So I've had at least 3 pairs from each brand to test from either company, Vivo and Xero. And the first thing I noticed when I started getting into sort of Barefoot minimalist shoes was that Xero and Vivo were a little bit different in their design style, and I thought that was interesting. So Vivo looked more sleek and was more aesthetically pleasing. Their designs were just simply better. There's no other way to chop it up. Their designs were simply better. They looked cooler. They had better, they just looked better, right? And this boot is a little old now, as you can see, but they just simply looked better. And then Xero, they were more kind of wider, more boxier shoes. Their design wasn't as refined as it is now back then. And I was just more drawn to Vivo Barefoot because I liked their designs more. I thought they had better designs. And as I wore both of these shoe brands, I started to recognize that the Vivo Barefoot shoes are Barefoot minimalist, but they're not true Barefoot minimalist like Xero shoes are, and I'll explain why. First and foremost, the toe box on a Vivo shoe, like this is their boot here, is wider than a regular shoe. However, it is still more narrow, and on that 3rd or 4th toe, it cuts in a little bit earlier than the Xero shoe, as you can see, side to side, back to back. Whereas in the Xero shoe, that 3rd or 4th toe in is further out that way. In other words, the toe box, and this is just a simple design thing you'll see with all Xero shoes now, as compared to Vivo shoes, the toe box on the Xero shoes is wider. Why is that valuable? Well, first and foremost, comfort. It's more comfortable. Your toes have more room. Your toes get to spread out further. They have more surface area. And then when your toes get to spread out further, just like a tripod or a chair or something like that, you have more surface area to lean on and to stand on, and that means that you can balance better. So the Xero shoes, while not as aesthetically pleasing as Vivo Barefoot, their shoes are much more, as far as the toe, we're just talking about the toe box right now, the toe box is wider, so your toes feel more comfortable in Xero shoes, and you're also going to have better balance, especially as you age. This is important because as you age, this becomes more challenging. Your balance diminishes, and when your balance diminishes, your lower body weakens, you fall, you break your hips, you die sooner. That's literally what happens. So I like that the Xero shoes have a wider toe box than the Vivo Barefoot. The Vivo Barefoot just cuts in a little bit sooner. And I noticed because I'm hiking in the mountains every day currently in Vermont, and I've been wearing the Vivo Barefoots because the water is running down from the mountains, the snow melting, all that. And I just noticed, they seem okay, but then now that the snow is more melted, I switched to the Xero shoes, these shoes, and I could tell instantly when I put them on and I started walking, I was like, this is a world of difference. Like literally my feet feel so much more free in Xero shoes than they do in Barefoot shoes. And that's because I believe mainly the toe box and just the overall design, although not this design at least, is not as aesthetically appealing as most of Vivo Barefoot models are. It's more functional and it feels better. So I don't really care, because the older I get, the less I care what people think, and the more I care how my feet feel and how my posture is, ideally, right? So that's the first thing, is that the wider toe box is a big difference. The second thing is that I noticed that they wear differently. So as you'll see, this shoe, it doesn't look fully flat, does it? It looks like it has a little heel elevation, and then it kind of curves up this way. See that rounded aspect? Now let's look at the Xero shoe by comparison. Very flat, a little curve at the end, but that's because I've worn it for a couple years. But the difference is, that's a big deal. So why is this important? Well, this is what you need to understand if you want to get into barefoot minimalist shoes. An elevated heel in the back, what that does is that tilts you forward like this, right? So when you're standing and your heel is elevated, it pushes you forward like this. It literally causes you to lean forward more, which causes your neck to lean forward like this, your shoulders to lean forward. Your posture then goes this way, which you don't want it to do. So while I love Vivo Barefoot for their designs, and I think their designs are fantastic, and they have cool, like I think this is made of like camel hide or something. Their boots have like camel hide in them, which is pretty awesome. They're not true barefoot minimalist shoes like Xero shoes are. So, and I will say, so starting out, Vivo Barefoot had the best designs, and their designs are still great. I love their designs. I still think they're probably a little bit better in the design department. However, because their toe box isn't as wide, and because they're not truly flat on the bottom, or at least it doesn't feel that way when I walk, because these shoes round in more over time than the Xeros do, you're not benefiting your posture as much. So your balance left to right isn't as good because your toes don't have as much room in the front. And then because the heel is elevated in the back, you're slightly leaning forward, which pushes your head and your neck forward and causes your posture to go like this. And the reason I am so passionate about Xero Barefoot Minimalist shoes as being the #1 company on the market, and Vivo Barefoot is still great for the designs. Maybe if you're going out for a night and you're not on your feet as much, Vivo is great for that because, they look great. But the thing I like about Xero is they started with function. Xero Shoes as a company started with their function. They cared most about the function of their shoes, the design principles by which makes something barefoot and minimalist. Then they added form to function. So they started with function, they got the function down pat. They have the best, most functional barefoot minimalist shoes on the market, period. I guarantee it. I've had barefoot minimalist shoes for longer than most people have even known what they are, and I've not found any brand that has better function as far as barefoot minimalist design. Wide toe box, flat sole, very functional movement patterns, right? So you strengthen your ankles, your toes have room to breathe and spread out. You think Tarzan feet as opposed to ballet feet. You want that for movement patterns left to right, for your agility, your mobility, your flexibility, and your strength, your ankle strength, and just your posture in general. So I recommend Xero shoes over Vivo Barefoot. Like I said, I've had, I think, 3 pairs of Vivo Barefoot, and then I've had like 5 or 6 of Xero shoes. So Xero Shoes has just won out over the years. They just have done a better job and their quality is superior. They just work better. So that's my review. These are the top 2 brands, I believe, though. I will say Lems is also a good brand. So my top 3 would be Xero Shoes, number 1, and then Lems and Vivo, number 2 and 3, in no particular order. But I don't even really look at Lems or Vivo Barefoot now because I know Xero Shoes has the best function. And their designs have gotten better over time. So they started with the right principles in mind, design and function of the shoes, and now the form is following suit, and they're looking cooler and they're looking more fresh. So I appreciate that. I appreciate the principles upon which Xero Shoes is founded, and they just work for me. So anyways, check them out. I'll put links to Xero Shoes. I'll put a link to Vivo Barefoot. I'll put a link to all these brands below. And if you're into functional movement patterns, fitness, nutrition, health, all this kind of stuff, as I'm sure you are if you're watching this video, check out the link below I put to healthywildfree.com/shop. That's going to list more than 20 brands, health and wellness brands, with some of which have discount codes, nutrition, superfoods, health and wellness products, fitness products, mini trampolines, vibration plates, all this kind of stuff with discount codes and so much more. So check that out below if you're into health and fitness, and I'll see you in the next video. Have a great day and enjoy your Xero Shoes. Cheers.